Hello and welcome to Women of the Middle East podcast.
Women of the Middle East.
This podcast relates the realities of Arab women and their rich and diverse experiences. It aims to present the multiplicity of their voices and wishes to break overdue cultural stereotypes about women of the Middle East. My name is Amal Al-Malki. I'm a feminist, scholar, and educator. This is Season 3, Conversations with Young Feminists.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Hello and welcome to Episode 2 of Series 3, Conversations with Young Feminists. This episode's feminist is one that is a fierce fighter and a vocal anti-racist activist. Racism is not an easy topic to talk about, yet a very important one. Just like with the Me Too movement in 2018 that started from the United States then became global, the Black Lives Matter of 2020 has also reached the shores of consciousness of many nations where race and racism weren't previously discussed, at least not overtly. The Black Lives Matter campaign that calls for the end of systematic racial discrimination has led to two parallel movements of solidarity across the Middle East and North Africa region. One of these two movements sympathized and condemned the practice, but claimed that it is a Western problem that doesn't exist in Arab and Muslim countries because these countries are dictated by the Islamic doctrine, which is based on equality and justice. The second movement is a realist one that declared that racism is pervasive in the MENA region just as it is in the rest of the world and carries the historical baggage of slavery. And this movement called for exposing all practices of racial discrimination as a first step towards addressing the problem.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
I would like to touch upon the role that social media, as it has always been, a double-edged weapon. It has certainly amplified the marginalized communities' voices, among which is the Black communities, by giving them a global platform and a global audience to expose the injustices and discrimination they face. But it also gives a space to racism and discrimination to be carried out, repeated, and circulated. As an observer of recurrent and top discussions pertaining to social justice, I've noticed, for an example, that an overdue discussion about racism in our part of the world was initiated by the younger generation, which resonated with celebrities and social media influencers, but with little participation from the intelligentsia. The reaction, of course, oscillated between proponents who called for exposing racial discrimination practices and called for legislative changes and social activism to change the people's mindset, and between opponents who exercised denial as well as anger, exactly what Robin DiAngelo coined and described as white fragility. This episode's guest is Khawla Ksiksi. She is an anti-racist activist and an intersectional feminist. In January 2020, she co-founded the collective Voices of Black Tunisian Women, which offers them a safe space for self-expression. It is the first initiative that addresses issues affecting Black women and gives voice to their experiences and promotes research about their social conditions. She has a lot to say about her personal experience as a Black Tunisian and her collective movement.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Since I came across your profile, I've been looking forward to meeting you. I'm really happy to have you in this series, which is the third series of Women of the Middle East podcast, Conversations with Young Feminists. Tell us about yourself and your work.
First of all, thank you for the invitation and for your interest. In fact, working on racism and on feminism in Tunisia, I started it just after the revolution at 2012. I joined an association who was called Mnemty, and I was really young back then and I didn't have many tools or I didn't understood the topic well, but I had this feeling that I have to do something about it. So I started with this association and we had many projects on raising awareness, because back then we were in fact facing the denial of the society, because when we started talking about racism in Tunisia, we didn't find like people supporting us, but everyone was telling us that we are crazy, that we are inventing things. And so basically our 5 first years were focused on raising awareness and just proving to society that it really exists. So it was really exhausting in the beginning, but it was worthy, because when I look back to the time then, and when I try to compare the situations, I think that we had a huge progress on this topic. So at 2018, we had the law against all kinds of discrimination and racial discrimination in Tunisia, which was a huge success for the civil society. And then we started to think that we have to have more than one association and to have to focus on this topic, and we have to merge our work and to move from raising awareness and advocacy to something more particular. And we thought about having this collective voice of Black Tunisian women. So I co-founded this collective, and we basically work on empowering Black women. It started with giving a safe space for Black women to talk about our issues, about hypersexualization, about harassment, about stigmatization, about our image and our place in the society. And it was really hard in the beginning, to be honest, because we are not used to speak up and to speak loudly and to abort our problems. So in the beginning, we didn't speak. We were really scared and we didn't have the courage to speak up. But then these dynamics were changed, and we were really interactive, and it developed. So after having the safe space, we tried to have some activities where we give the space to Black women. So it was in two fields. The one field was the knowledge production. So we were writing articles, and we are now making videos about our situation, about our issues, and about our alternative that we pose to the government and to the society. And on the other hand, we had many virtual activities like healing circles and webinars where we discussed about our issues either. So, and now we are thinking about having another project, like a technical project where we empower the Black women in the south of Tunisia.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Amazing. Such achievements in such a short time. You told me you began your activism very early and you were much younger. But what was your point of departure? And what can you share with us personally that made you go publicly on a matter that was long buried? It's a stigma to even talk about the ills of the society, let alone the marginalization of a sector of nationals in that country that don't feel a part of that social fabric. What was the personal point of departure for you?
In fact, before I started my activism, I was also in denial. I was creating my coping mechanism and my defense mechanism, and I always say that people are racist in Tunisia, but I don't care, and they don't affect me, and they don't affect my life, and I'm strong, and all of this discourse that we build to protect ourselves. But I had a personal story where I couldn't get engaged with the white men because I was Black. And at that moment, I realized that it's not just words that we hear in the street. It's something that can change your life, that can affect you personally, that can make you really sad and really marginalized. And I started talking with other people because we don't talk about this subject. And even if we face racism every day, even among Black people, we don't talk about racism. So I started to onboard my friends and my family and to talk about this issue. And then I realized that racism can take your job, can take your mental health, can attack you physically, and it's not just words that we hear in the street when we walk, and it's not something that we can avoid. And then after that, I started to realize that it's systemic, that the state is racist and the society is racist, and it's bigger than I thought. And with the years, every time and every year, and with every development in my personality, I realize how deep and how big is the problem. And then I realized that we have to do a lot to face it because it's so old, to be clear. It's so old, it's everywhere, it's in all the areas. So I think it's very important for us to realize that we are breathing the racism. So we have to face it really strongly, and we have to have many ways to face it because it's everywhere. And since I integrated the circle of activists, I started to develop my ideas and to have my new conception of the club.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
But the problem is deep-rooted, as you said, and the problem with our culture and our society is that they built it within the culture that you inherit that sense of inferiority. Sometimes it's harder to have this conversation with the older generation because they're fine. They internalized it. Was it easier to talk to the younger generation and have that collective movement than the older generation, or what do you think?
In fact, for me, it was easier to talk with the younger ones, of course. And it was easier for me to talk with people in the capital, in Tunis, because I'm from the south of Tunisia, and in the south of Tunisia there is a big concentration of black persons, and I think that slavery left a big mark there. So when I wanted to talk about this in the south in the beginning, it was really difficult, and they were saying we are used to that, and this is our life, and we don't want to change it. But now it's changing everywhere because we are we are putting the light on the racial aggressions, and we talk about in the television, and we have the law. So things are changing. But in the south of Tunisia, it was really difficult for me because I think that slavery has gone, but this link of domination and this precarity of black persons, and they are always linked to the white ones for work and for everything, and they don't own land. So I think that slavery was abolished legally, but in the economic and politics and the societal field, I think it's still here. So it was easier in the capital because black persons in Tunis were independent, and I found the people who are really interested and who want to work on the topic and who have many experience like mine. So yeah, because I think in the south of Tunisia, we don't even think about having a relationship between white men and black women. So even the black families, they don't accept that we mix. So that's why in the capital, I think I found many cases like mine, because we had this opportunity to meet people and to have our own relationships.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Khawla, you define yourself as a feminist, right? Where do you place yourself as a feminist? Not that you have to. What do you feel more attracted to or supported by? Arab feminism? Is there such a thing as Black Arab feminist?
Unfortunately, I don't place myself as an Arab feminist. I place myself in the way of thinking as an American feminist because I'm deeply involved in intersectionality and all of these theories, and I'm really impressed by the Latin American feminists and their movement and their anarchism. Even if we see my two movements or the two movements that I'm involved in, the first is Falgatna, which is really inspired by the feminist movement in Chile and in Argentina. And the other is it's a voice of Black Tunisian women, which is really inspired by the theories of Angela Davis and Bell Hooks and all of this intersectionality. And I think and all of us, we don't have a big link with the Arab feminists. But now I'm trying to place myself as an African feminist because I'm trying to connect with the feminists in other African countries. In North Africa, we don't have a big link with West and East and South Africa. So I'm having this reflection lately, why don't we erase a Pan-African feminist movement? Because I think that we are facing the same problems with the particularity of each context, but I think that we have to place ourselves as Africans, because in North Africa we are not so proud with our Africanity, and because, for example, in Tunisia, they're always asking me if I am Tunisian every day because I'm Black. So questioning if I am Tunisian or not make me sometimes repulse my Africanity. So I think we have many issues to talk about, and our African identity is really, really important, and we have to highlight it. So now I'm on my way of connecting with other feminists in other countries in Africa, and I'm so glad that I'm in Dakar right now. So I will connect and I will have more opportunities to have more contact.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Doesn't take away from you being a Tunisian, by the way. And you have every right to stand up and say, yes, I am Tunisian. My skin color doesn't define, there's no definition for a Tunisian. It doesn't say an Arab Tunisian, an Arab white Tunisian, or an African Black Tunisian. On the contrary, you're starting this conversation, which is very, very healthy for the younger generation who wants to still be a part of that national, right, definition, but at the same time, respect its hybridity. You don't have to be one thing or the other.
In fact, we are trying to now to have this conversation, and in Tunis, all the families know their origins, or know, for example, that they are coming from a Turkish side or a Spanish side or Italian side. But for the Black person, we don't care, because somehow we don't have this pride of being from another country. So this identity issue, we are now talking about it. I think it's so important for us as Tunisian women to realize that we are more than that, and to focus on our identity. And because I think being proud or accepting what we are is really important, even for our fight.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Definitely, 100%. And you're starting a very healthy conversation about identity. Now, you lead both domestic and international fights and campaigns against them. How is your messaging being altered or modified for each? What do you say when You talk about racism in Tunisia and North Africa. And what do you say when you talk about it internationally? Do you have one message, or do you alter your message according to the culture, the mindsets?
No, in fact, it's so different because when we talk about racism in Tunisia, it's basically attacking the government and the state, because the systemic racism we are facing every day, and we are seeing its effects on every field. And now we have the law. The law is good. We are so happy. We are so proud, but it's not applied. And the law mentioned that the state is required to make a campaign against racism on the cultural and the economical and the societal field. Until now it has been 3 years and we didn't see anything. So our discourse is always pointing the state and asking for our rights, because as the government had discriminated Black persons in Tunisia, now I think that they have to de-discriminate them by pushing them from the margin to the center. And we are waiting for this. We want this to happen, and we don't see a big response from the state and from the decision makers. So when we talk in Tunisia, it's either for mobilizing other communities about our cause, or to advocate for our rights. But when we talk in the international field, I think it's more about how we will build our capacity and how we will empower ourselves as a movement. We try to learn from other experiences, we try to share, to develop our ideas, to theorize, to have concepts. So it's so different, I think. And it requires different people, because there is some people of the field who will go and protest, who will track every mistake of the government, who will check everything, and there is other academician people who will write, who will make theories, who will discuss and will develop, in fact, the content and our knowledge about our issue. So it's really so different, I think.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Talking to the government and requesting the government to make sure that the law is practiced is something, but how would you change the culture? How would you change the mindset? How would you change people who don't understand the practices that have been entrenched in their system? They don't understand that this is racism. They don't understand that this is discrimination. How do you talk to those people?
Yeah. In fact, we try to explain. I think I spent 50% of my lifetime explaining things when I go in a taxi. Sometimes I want to take a taxi, and they think that I'm not Tunisian, so they don't want to take me. And then I speak in Arabic, and they accept. So I'm there and I'm explaining. So sometimes, in fact, we communicate through social media to explain some theories, because, in fact, even small things, even when people tell you that you are beautiful and they're surprised, because normally for them, if you are Black, you don't have to be beautiful. And even for people who say, "Can I touch your hair?" and they don't realize that it's something very annoying, because it happens like...
It's not normal. If someone asks me to touch my hair, it's just not normal, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not normal. So in fact, we try to explain, and that's why we started this project about having a video to explain this kind of small mistakes to people, and to explain how we take it and what effect it has. Because, and I think it's something that have to be bigger than us, I think, and that's why I'm pointing the state, because I think they have give money for filmmakers to have films about this kind of issues. They have to support the visibility of Black people in the screen, in the TV, in the public spaces, in the parliament, in the government. We have, in fact, sometimes I don't blame the small citizen who just assume or just think that Black persons are limited because they don't see them in power positions in the public space. So I can understand somehow how they can think this way. So I think we have our work to do as a civil society, and the state have its work to do because it's so big, and I don't think that we can make it on our own.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
No, and this is why I'm thinking in Tunis, we know that there is a robust civil society. You've got many women organizations, feminist organizations. Why don't you join forces with them? Okay, I agree, Arab feminisms maybe failed to integrate Arab or Black Arabs' voices and experiences. But the existing feminist organizations in Tunisia should be working closely with you instead of you starting from the scratch.
And that's why, in fact, I'm really inspired by intersectionality, because now it's starting. Because before the feminist scene was so white. And when I say white, even I can, it was really inspired by the European feminism, and we just want to copy this model and to put it in our society. We don't even think about it. So Black persons and Black women were really marginalized, and in some associations, I don't think that they accept Black women with them. So now it's changing, this new movement and this new era of feminism in Tunisia. And I was so glad because when we had the protest, our last protest in Tunisia, it was really a big protest, and it was the first time that other movements joined us. Usually we are only on our own. We are like for 20%, and we try to raise our voices. In fact, it's new to join forces for us in Tunisia, because before every movement has its own work. So I'm optimistic about that.
That's good.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Tell me, how can you educate the Arab speakers about the use of language? The use of language, of course, reinforces and perpetuates racism and racial discrimination, given that we don't follow any forms of political correctness, in Arabic. Mm-hmm. So what would you say we could do to watch our language, basically? What do you have any tips?
I always correct gently when people say something attacks my community, and sometimes people refuse. So I make some remarks, but not gently, to be honest. So, but I think what the tips that I have is that we have to try to change linking Black with bad things. Because when we speak, we always, if we have a bad day, we say we had a Black day today. If there is something that we don't like, we say that it's a Black. And if we try to separate Black with bad things, I think when we speak, our language will be less violent towards this community. And there is some words who are forbidden. It's so clear that we can't tell someone slave, or I don't know. It's so clear. But for sometimes there is a small thing that we don't care about, but it's really marking. We had this a lot, even in songs and in our how to say patrimoine.
Popular media, popular culture, right?
Yeah. So it's
everything, yes.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can't even react because it's so used by everyone, so you think that you are crazy if you want to erase. For example, we have a small payment in Tunisia, and it's called the payment of the land of the slaves.
Oh.
And no one want to change it, and we don't even, in fact, I don't even dare to ask people to change it because everyone is using it.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important that we point this and say, this is what it is. If you want to change, okay. If you don't want to change, but this is what it is.
True.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Tell me, you've talked about sexual harassment in specific. And I see I see your work is mainly at the intersection between the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. Tell me more about that.
In fact, being a woman in Tunisia and in Arabic North African country, it's not easy. And being Black either. So, in fact, being a Black woman, for us, having this combined discrimination together, it's really hard, and I think it deserves a particular attention. Because in the mind of people in Tunisia, we are always assimilated to sex workers, or for people who have a big appetite for men, and when they approach us, they don't approach us the same way that they approach a non-Black woman. Because they think, in fact, that they are welcome every day and every night, and we don't have any selection, and we will accept anything. And sometimes I walk in the street, and they don't even call me; they just show me the money, because they think I'm a sex worker. Because in Tunisia we have this, they say that sleeping with a Black woman, it will cure all of your diseases. So yeah, and they believe it. And I remember when I was a teenager, 15, 16 years old, they were asking me to cure their disease, and they were really serious about it. In the mind of the society, we are sex objects, and it's really obvious and it's really big. So that's why I think that sexual harassment for Black women is the quality and the quantity. It's not the same for non-Black women. And they also know that the majority of Black women are poor, and they don't know people in higher positions, so they're not scared about attacking them, about aggression them. And we know that most of the Black women work as maids and as housekeepers, so they are really in the position to receive this kind of aggression. So I think that we have to put the problem in the table and to give it its real size, because we don't want to talk it. And even feminists in Tunisia, they always say, no, all the women are facing harassment, but not all the women are facing it the same way. And that's why, in fact, it was the first thing that triggered us to have this movement of Black women, because they didn't let us speak about our issues as Black and women.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
But you've achieved a lot in such a short time. Do you sense that this change in global consciousness, do you feel that racial justice has become integrated in the global call for social justice, or is it a temporary phenomenon? Do you have hope that this is going to go somewhere?
Of course, I have hope. Otherwise, I will quit everything. No, I have hope, because going from there is no racism in Tunisia to having a law against racism in Tunisia, it's really huge. And people now, they don't dare to say there is no racism in Tunisia. Even if they still say it, but it's not the big majority. So I don't know if we will move as fast as we did before. I don't think so, because in the beginning it was really fresh, and we gave all of energy to that, and we had facts to prove to everyone that we are facing racism. Now we are targeting the state, and it's so different. Because changing the mentality and changing the society, it's a long process. We know this, we are aware of everything, and we are not waiting to see the results right now because it takes a long time. But our advocacy work, I think it's the hardest thing now, because we have to protect the victims. Even if the society will take 50 years to change, we have to protect people, and we have to protect the vulnerable community from racism. And that's why I think it's so hard. It's so hard to be taken seriously from the police officer. It's so hard to convince the judge that telling someone you're a slave is a violence, and it's not just a word. It's so hard for us to go into the system and to try to change it. I have hope, of course, but I think it will be so hard.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Yes, but you're creating something that will be sustainable and will have long-lasting impact for generations to come. You need to tackle it on multiple levels. You spoke about knowledge production, and that's important. Reach out to people who can help with this cause. And your cause is my cause as a feminist. So reach out to feminists that you know could help on an academic level, studies, research, but also reach out to institutions and organizations who can help with awareness, campaigns. All of those things will make things move. Targeting the state only, yes, you have a law, which is good, but people's practices and people's perception needs to change as well. And this takes longer, but the impact is long-lasting as well. Khawla, I can't tell you how much I'm proud of you. I'm very happy to have talked to you today. This is only the beginning for you. Okay, of course, you need to be hopeful. Sometimes we need to listen and we need to hear others' voices. Sometimes we're just internally very occupied by our own. It doesn't mean that we don't care.
Thank you so much. In fact, it's so relieving to hear this after all the frustration that we were facing in all the fields. So I am really, really happy to meet you, in fact. And I think that we will be working together, of course, because in fact, in our movement, we have, we are 6 founders. We have the activist one, we have the artist ones, and we have the academicians. So there is this mix. In fact, I think that we will attack more than one field, and I think that we will be working together.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. For discussion and feedback on today's episode, contact me via Instagram. For any ideas about collaborations, please contact us at wme@amalalmalki.com.